Alright everybody, in this video we are going to explore the US Copyright Office website and talk about registering your own copyright. To be honest with you, I hate doing this. As a lawyer, I stopped doing copyright registrations probably 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. It's so annoying. The website is so horrible that I'd rather teach you how to do it than have you hire me to do it. So that's pretty sad if that tells you anything. But let's get through this quickly because it's actually such a cumbersome site. It's going to take some time to process, and I'm also going to show you throughout the video a couple of hacks to get around different things that would slow you down in the process, and also kind of highlight some potential areas where you might get a rejection or have issues with the site or the registration process. So you definitely want to go through each of the segments on this and just walk through. So we'll start with, if you're on copyright.gov, that is the US Copyright Office website, you can handle this, go get into the system a couple different ways. One is up here, registration up here. The other is to scroll down and you'll see register works. Either one will get you there. We're going to go ahead and click on registration. Now, you'll see that you could register works. There's a lot of different options here, but we really just want to get to the registration portal. So we'll click on that. And you will see, and this is sort of the first indication of why this is such a silly designed site. The user interface is just horrible, is because you should have just been connected to the login, but instead you're at this page that you got to read what's going on here, what are groups of unpublished work, notice of deposit account, blah, 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 blah. We really just want to get into the system. We want to log into the what they call the ECO, or Electronic Copyright Office Registration System. So we're going to click on that. Now, for those of you who do not have an account, you're going to have to set up an account. And that, fortunately, is relatively intuitive. I obviously have an account, so I'm going to bypass a little bit of that. So we're going to log into the ECO. So again, we've had to click 3 times just to get in to logged in. This should have taken us already there on the first click, but here we are clicking again. And then you'll see once you click on that, it's going to actually have another login. So we're over here, and here's where you're going to have your user ID and your password. Mine's blurred out, but you'll have your information that you've completed from your registration. So now hopefully after 4 clicks, we'll finally get into the system. Let's click login. So now you're going to start seeing all the notices. Your password will expire soon. This is a periodic thing that comes up with your account. I think there's another couple notices. Oh, great. So we don't have any other notices. So when you look at this page, it's pretty messy. It's really hard. It's not intuitive at all, right? So I don't want to keep pointing out the obvious. This is a horribly designed website. So what we want to do is register a work, and we're going to go to the standard application. Now keep in mind, when you're registering songs like lyrics and melodies, or you're registering sound recordings, or you're registering maybe a music video, you typically can do all of that from right here under register a work and the standard application. So we're going to click on that to get started. And of course, which we're finding already is pretty typical of this website, there's a lot of words, right? Explaining what you can and can't do, how to start. The frustrations never end, so I'm going to keep pushing through this, right? So what we're assuming is that you're registering 1 work per application. So if you have more than 1 work, you could see down here the exceptions of 2 or more unpublished works, 2 or more photographs, 2 or more issues of a serial, etc. We just want to go with like 1 song or 1 recording, and I'm going to talk you through that. This may be 1 song, this may be 1 album, and that's one of the hacks we'll kind of talk about here in a second. But for now, we're just assuming we're going to have 1 claim, and so we're going to start that registration. So again, if you're counting like the number of clicks just to get to a point where you can start inputting, we're at what, 6 or 7 clicks already? So we start the registration. And by the way, start the application. So over here on the left, you'll see the different sections that you'll be going through as you proceed through this application. And if you wanted to click through, you can't unless the prior ones are completed already. So that's part of the frustration too, because if you wanted to kind of skip ahead and see, well, what are claimants, or can I just input that information? Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to click around. You're going to have to follow the chronological course here set by the Copyright Office. You'll see continue and save for later. This way, if you're working on it and you can't finish it because it takes you 2 hours to do an application, you can save for later and come back to it. So our starting point is we want to select the type of work. You'll notice in this drop down you have 6 options here. Is it a literary work, a work of visual arts, a sound recording, work of performing arts, motion picture, AV work, or single serial issue? So if we're talking about music, I want to right away hit one of the sort of hacks or information things that'll help you get through this process quickly, or quicker rather, and that is if you have a recording of a song that you own the copyright in the recording and you also own the copyright in the underlying lyrics and melody, you can actually start with a sound recording application and cover both the sound recording and the underlying musical composition. If you have different owners, you cannot do that on this application, or rather under one of these. So I'm going to assume, just to walk you through this, that you own the copyright in the sound recording, or the track as you may call it, and you also own the underlying musical composition. Now let's say there's more than one owner. If they are the same for both, then, so if you have a producing and co-writing partner, and it's 2 of you, and you own the sound recording and the underlying musical work 50-50, let's say, then you still can do this. The point is it has to be the same owner or owners on both items in order to do it on the same application. If not, you're going to have to register the sound recording as one piece of property, and then you'll separately register the musical composition as a separate piece of property with different ownership. And this language right here kind of goes on to explain that. I don't think it's necessarily intuitive or clear, but it does explain it here. Also, I want to highlight that the Copyright Office does do a good job of mentioning these circulars. So down here you'll see, for more information about registering sound recordings, see Circular 56. Now, that is where the Copyright Office does actually a decent job of explaining things in a longer format, what they call circulars, almost like a little newsletter or handout that says, hey, this is what you can do or can't do, or this is how you do it. So if you did want to click on that, that's going to open up some literature that you can read through that will explain a little bit more about sound recordings. But we don't need to do that now. What we're going to do is walk through this. So we selected the type of work as a sound recording. We're going to go to register the song, the recording or track itself, plus the underlying musical composition on this same application. That's how I'm going to walk you through this. So if you do not have the same owners on all of the same properties, what you're going to do is a sound recording one first, and then a musical composition application after that. Or you could do the musical application one first and the sound recording second. The order does not matter. It's just the fact that you have to do separate applications. So then you're clicking here, which is basically saying, yes, I understand the above descriptions. This is part of what keeps you from getting rejections. And also, you're not going to be able to move forward in the application if you forget to check the box. So we selected it, we checked the box, we're going to continue. Now is where we find, and I'll joke about this periodically from here on out, more clicking for what should be intuitive and autofill. So here we're going to add titles. Now you can kind of keep in line again on this left hand side, this box, this table. We're talking about the titles. If it's a name of a song, you would think you could just drop into some boxes and start adding titles, but you can't. You have to add new, and then you're going to say, what title is this? It's the title of the work being registered. Now, let's say that this is a title of a larger work, like an album, and then you have subtitles, or song titles rather. You could do that here, but in this case, we're going to do a song, a title of a work being registered. If you wanted to do a previous or an alternate title, if this was a secondary application for some other work that pre-existed, you can click here. But my point for this training is going to be, we're going to do this work right now as if it's a new published work. So this is the title of the work being registered, and let's call it, This Is My New Song. Okay, that's the title of our work. We're going to save, silly, because now we go back, and that's a just in case we had other titles to add. Now, this actually is a useful tool, because if this was the title of the album where remember we did that drop down and it was the title of a larger work, Now we could go new and add the songs under that album. So each would be a new title of the work, you add the song, so on and so forth. But looking down at this table as it's now being completed is the title of your work, doesn't list volume number, issue date, because we haven't input any of that information and don't need to right now. But the title of the work being registered is this type. We can edit it here if you make a mistake. You can delete it here if you make a mistake. But for now, we're going to move on. This is my new song. We continue, and now has this work been published? In order for copyright registration, copyright protection to establish, typically we're looking for publication of a work. Now there are elements of copyright law we're not going to get into in this training, that whether there is protection for unpublished works. In this case, we're not talking about those, and I'm not going to take that detour. So this is a published work. We put it out on the DSPs. We use DistroKid or CD Baby or TuneCore or whoever, or maybe we're signed and so it's out there. The point is this work has been published for the purposes of our process. When you do that, you're going to see a new set of boxes. Year of completion. We're just going to go with 2022, not 2922. First date of publication. Now you can pick a date here that you want to look at when it was first published. So if it was released last month, you're going to put the date of release. The nation of first publication, if you're in the US, you're going to figure out that this is a US nation of first publication. However, I've worked with some bands that are they're in the United States, but they actually first released a song or a project in the UK, for example. So you might put that it was first published in the UK, not the United States. If you don't know, if you put it on a DSP and you are an artist in the US, put United States unless you have a reason to put a different country. Okay, if you know the international standard number and you could get help with that, or any of these numbers up here, you can see this drop down. If you had an ISWC, which you could get from your aggregator. So if you use DistroKid, for example, you'll go into the song in your artist account, and you will find the ISWC number in there, and possibly the ISRC number as well. So you could put that information in here if you had it. You don't need it. You'll notice these red asterisks are the only areas that are required. And if this was a pre-registered work, you can put a number here. Since we're good with these dates, again, we're making this up and we're not actually going to submit this, we'll continue. Now, if we wanted to, we could save for later, but for now, we're going to continue. And now we're going into authors. We're seeing these checkboxes start to populate. We're seeing the process we're making, and we're going to list the authors. Now, if it was me, we're going to go with Brock. If we're going with my last name here. If it's a corporation or an LLC, you could put that here. If it's an individual, it's going to be a citizenship, typically, which you could put here. Now, if it was a corporation, you might have a you don't have a U.S. citizen, or as a corporation is not a U.S. citizen. So let's actually do that real quick. We'll see that once you put that information, you would actually populate one of these, citizenship or domicile, relative to whether you put individual or organization. For your purposes, put an individual, Brock Scheinen, citizen of the United States. You do not have to put your year of birth, and obviously you're not dead because you're watching this video, so you're not going to have a year of death. If you have, if you had a reason to go anonymous or with a pseudonym, you would. There's no reason here for you to do that. You're not giving away or giving away your copyright or registering it in nobody's name. It's going to be your name, right? So now we're going to add that. Sorry, we're going to save that, and we're going to say what this author created. Now, if I am the author of the sound recording, I'm going to say that here. Now, you'll notice what's written down here that you can actually say the recorded, so the author created only the sound recording. You could check that box. If you contributed both the sound recording and the recorded work, you can also add that information like lyrics and music. So we're going to do that here. We're going to say lyrics so that we know in this application that we are both, right? We're the author of both. So we're going to save that. Now you see that I'm listed, and there's all these are blanks because I didn't add any of that information. and then we can edit or delete just like the other screens. If we have a co-producing, co-writing partner that owns the same on both pieces of property, we can add new and add somebody else here. And that's what we would do. The other name, other last name, and the citizenship or domicile. And then we save, and for now we're going to go back to cancel. This is complete as is. I'm the sole owner of both the sound recording and the lyrics and music. So I'm going to continue. Now you're seeing our progress. We're into claimants. Now the claimants may be different than the author. So I want to point out something here that is important for most artists to understand, that typically if you're an indie artist, you are the author and you're also the claimant. If you're signed to an indie deal but your label doesn't register copyrights for you, or for whatever reason, maybe you do have a relationship with a label or publisher but they make you take care of the copyright information, you need to understand contractually whether you are also the claimant. So meaning, have you transferred any rights to your label or your publisher? You may not be the claimant even if you are the author. So for here, in our purposes today in this training, we're assuming that you are both the author and the claimant. And that should be your default position unless you have a reason to know you are not the claimant. So I'm going to add me as the claimant, and it's going to pre-populate my information. And if it says here, if the claimant's not an author, you must include a transfer statement. So this may be your record deal. This may be your publishing deal. But here's a little practice tip or a pro tip for you. You do not want to add your entire record deal to the Copyright Office database. Copyright Office database is a public record in essence. Whatever you include here typically is going to be available to the public. You never want to upload contracts, and you want to be very careful even with assignment documentation. And so if you've assigned something to your label, sometimes you can get a short form or even an amendment, and where you're just supplying the amendment. I don't want to get into the legal details of that, but my point here is don't include a full contract if you can avoid it. Include some sort of statement that says this is why the claimant is different than the author. In my case, I am the claimant and I'm the author, so I'm just going to add that here. I'm going to save that. And so now you see author's complete. The claimant here has my information, and I'm going to continue because it's just me. Now we are going to limit the claim if there is a limit. So we only complete this screen if the claim involves a previously registered work or something else that we don't own or something in the public domain. So let's say that you did a Christmas song that was in the public domain. You might exclude, so when we, keep in mind, when we went back to what did the author contribute, we said lyrics and melody, that may not be entirely true if this is a public domain song. So the assumption as we walked through this was this is all original work. But if you did have a public domain song that you recorded and maybe did an adaptation or a derivative work or something like that, we're not going to get into derivative works right now, but you get the point. If you're an artist, you know what I'm talking about. You may limit by clicking here, including prior registrations, if you re-recorded somebody else's work, and these are the ones that you may click if you included new material, or if you're including, referencing prior registrations, or if you're excluding something. Now, the exclusion here might be sound samples, for example. So you might not be claiming the entire copyright because there's sound samples in here that you're going to exclude. But this is one of those areas where I will say this, sometimes you want an attorney's input on this particular section. Simply because if you know that your registration, your application includes materials that you don't own, or they're somebody else's work, or you sampled, or they're public domain, you might just want to get a quick consult on the correct options to choose here. But for now, we're just going to say there are no limitations to the claim, so we're just going to proceed. Now we're into rights and permissions. So this is where, this is another pro tip. A lot of times, artists will just jump through this and they're like, oh, come on, I got to put more information. Well, let me give you a reason why you might want to put information here. A couple of reasons. Number one, if people are searching for the copyright owner because they actually want to license your song and you don't complete this, that may or may not get to you. Now granted, you could say, well, Brock, what are you talking about? My name and address is all over the place. I'm an author, I'm a claimant. It's where the certificate was mailed, blah, blah, blah. My name's all over the place. True, true, and true. But you may have an administrator that you're going to list here, some administration company acting on your behalf. You may have a separate person that's acting as the kind of contact person for rights and permissions. Maybe it's a manager. So you would be putting all that information here. For now, we're going to leave it blank because this part's intuitive. But my point is, I really think you should fill this in. It will give the outside world a way to reach you if they want permission and they want to know how to get rights for your song or use your recording, sync and film and TV rights, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is when we talk about statutory notices, you want to make sure that one of the ways that you get paid is by providing comprehensive contact information, complete and accurate, everywhere you register your materials. So the more that's missing, the less likely even those statutory notices are going to get to the right people, which is you, right? So for now, we're going to say, hey, that's me. I'm going to skip through it. Here is where we have to, and actually, let's go back real quick. You notice there were no red highlights here. We didn't have to include this information. We want to, but we didn't have to. But when we go to the correspondent, we have to. This is where I want to add myself. This is where I want to put my email address and my address. Now keep in mind, this is a public record, as I already said. So you're going to want to include an email that you don't mind being public or that already is. And so if you can use a P.O. box or an office address, anything like that, which I always include my office address. And so you'll see a lot of this is blurred out in the video because it's populating with some of my personal information. So that's why it's blurred out, but you obviously can fill all of this out. Again, the more information you provide, the better. So now we're going to continue and we're going to hit the mail certificate. So by now you're like, Brock, why did I have to include my name and my contact information 6 times already or whatever? Well, because each of these serves a different purpose. I'm the author. I'm also the claimant. I also am the person for rights and permission. I'm also the person that you could correspond with. I'm also the person where I want my certificate sent. So I'm going to add that in. I'm going to add my office address and we're going to populate that. Boom. So now when the when the certificate is mailed and issued, it's going to be sent to me. You might have a P.O. box or a reason to send it somewhere else. That's where you would include that. Now we get to special handling. If there is no special handling, this is all blank. But let's say it's because of a litigation. You need to sue, and in order to sue for copyright infringement, you have to have a copy of this. Well, you're definitely going to want to say, this is special handling because I'm in litigation right now, and I need this certificate in order to prosecute or defend a lawsuit. So that's where you click here and here. Or maybe there's a customs matter, and we can't import something or export something because of that. Or maybe there's a contract dispute. So any or all of these can be selected. And if you do select them, you're certifying that you have basically the right to special handle this. We're going to click through it. Now for the certification, this is you saying, I am either the author or the claimant or the owner of the exclusive rights or the authorized agent of one of those. So an attorney like me can do this for you. But I'm teaching you how to do this yourself. If you try to register somebody else's copyright or you register a copyright that is not actually yours and you don't fit one of the criteria in this certification, you can be liable for false representation or fraud basically, and fined, among other things. So we want to certify here, we want to put our name here, and we're going to add that in. And then if there are any other specific instructions, at this point there won't be, so we're just going to continue. And now we are going to review the whole submission. Now again, going back to this horrible user interface, we just kind of scroll through and we're like, this is so ugly and so cumbersome. But we're going through each section. So if you'll notice all on the left here follows with all of these categories. The title goes to the title and so on. And we're lining up, we're saying, yep, that should have been blank, correspondence correct, mail certificates all correct. Great, all looks good. So we're going to add to cart. This is the next screen before we get into some of the payment issues, but we're going to add that to the cart. And now we're going to, and you'll triple confirm everything's correct. Now you might have a few different recordings that you're working on, or a few different applications. So you might see a handful here, and that's maybe some of your open cases, or if you're attaching documents, you'll see all that here. For now, we're going to assume that this is our application. It's ready to go. We're going to check out. Once you check out, again, you'll see, wow, more clicking. So we can pay by a deposit account, which you can set up. If you do this frequently and you're going to do a lot, maybe you want to set up an account with the Copyright Office. Otherwise, you just pay by credit card. So you're going to click here. And now we're clicking again because we're actually going to the U.S. Treasury Site. We're going off the U.S. Copyright Office website. Now we're going to the Treasury Site. Now I'm not going to go through the Treasury Site payment simply because that one is relatively intuitive. You input your name, address, credit card information, blah, 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 and then you will be able to pay for your work. Where we're going to go from here is kind of leave off with, we wish to proceed. I'm just going to show you what that'll look like once you bounce over. And we're bouncing to the Treasury Office website, which is pay.gov. You're going to click credit card, you're going to put in your information, continue, and then ultimately you're going to pay. Now what happens is you're submitting your copyright application. Once it's submitted, one of the things you did not notice is that there was not a deposit made, and I don't mean your money deposit, I mean proof of the actual copyright. The U.S. Copyright Office requires you to have a deposit of the actual copyright itself, and that would be the recording. We went back and obviously can't, so I'm gonna close it out here. At some point, you are going to get a message that via email that'll say you have to make a deposit. At that point, that deposit, keep in mind it's not your financial deposit. You've already paid for this application. That means submit the recording. Now, you'll see instructions when you get that communication, but in essence, you're just going to upload the MP3 and submit it, and that will contain the recording and the underlying lyrics and music. So I'm going to cut it off there. That is the totality of the process, at least at this step, trying to streamline it for you. You can see why this is very annoying to do, and so many different clicks that could be pre-populated and saved and forwarded to the next screen, but this is the Copyright Office at work. So unfortunately, this is what it is. Get going, and I know you'll probably run into more questions and well, what do I do if it's in a derivative work, things like that. You can always drop that down in the comments. I'll try and jump in there and give some answers, and if we get enough people asking the same kind of questions, I'll probably jump in and do another video. So for now, that is the U.S. Copyright Office copyright application process. All right, hope you do well.